Burning truth.
Thank you.
It's a really good idea to get something like that in order to to identify logical fallacies that are used in creation, evolution, or arguments. So
thank you. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. My question is, I like softball questions for you. As a scientist, I like to have predictability and then be able to see something observationally. So I'm going to throw out a softball in the astrophysics area. Dr. Humphreys, I believe, did a prediction on the magnetic field of Uranus and Neptune, I believe. Could you explain what his prediction was and how it was shown observationally?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Dr. Humphreys, Russ Humphreys, he's a friend of mine. He's a PhD in physics and a biblical creationist, believes in that God created about 6,000 years ago. And he's contributed quite a bit to astronomy. There's a few things we disagree on, but he's a good friend. And one of the models that really impressed me is his model of planetary magnetic fields. Magnetic fields are caused by electrical current in the core of a planet, because that's what causes magnetism, is electricity. Maybe you've made a little electromagnet. You take a coil of wire, wrap it around, touch the ends of a battery, it makes a little magnet there. So you got current, freely flowing electricity in the Earth's core, and then the other planets, not all of them, but most of them. And that current encounters resistance, and so it slows down. And so the magnetic fields naturally decay with time. We've been able to measure that with the Earth's magnetic field. We know it's decayed in the last, we've had it measured almost 200 years. So we know the Earth's magnetic field is decaying. We know the rate at which it's decaying. It's an exponential decay. And Russ Humphreys came up with an idea that basically made a reasonable guess as to what the starting magnetic field would be for the Earth. Because we know the Earth's made from water, and water has a certain magnetic property to it because of the way the electrons and that works out. And so Russ Humphreys proposed, he said, well, assuming you take the mass of the Earth, assuming it was all water originally, and then God transformed it into other material, but the magnetic field then converted into current at that time. Pretty clever. And you find that if you do that, and then you calculate the rate at which the magnetic field has decayed in 6,000 years, you get the current magnetic field of the Earth. Pretty close. Pretty neat. And so then he said, well, let's assume, for the sake of argument, even though the Bible doesn't say specifically that the other planets are made from water, let's suppose that they were, and calculate what their magnetic field would be after 6,000 years of decay. And you find you get the right answer for Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. Pretty neat. Now, at that time, this was back in 84, I think. 84 is when he did this. At that time, we had not visited with spacecraft the planets Uranus or Neptune. And so Humphreys said, well, let's apply it to those planets. He says, I predict the magnetic field of Uranus will be this amount. I predict the magnetic field of Neptune will be that amount. The secularists thought those magnetic fields would be gone by now because over 4 billion years they should have run out. And when Voyager 2 went past and measured the magnetic field of Uranus, it was within the error bars that Humphreys predicted. His prediction was right on. And likewise for Neptune. So I think that's a pretty impressive model, really. And I appreciate Russ doing that. So there's an example of how you start with biblical presuppositions, you get the right answer. You really do. Okay, good. Any other questions? Hi.
I apologize because I was out in the back buying a whole bunch of stuff. So you may have answered.
You don't have to apologize for that.
Well, you may have answered the question already, so I apologize if it is a repeat, but I actually have two questions. Okay. So the first one, the argument about Mount St. Helens, that the rocks that were newly formed were aged millions of years, even though they were only, a couple of days old or whatever the case may be. How do they know, though, that the rock that came up from the Earth wasn't in fact millions of years old? So it's possible that even though it was just formed, it could have come from material. Like, how do you argue that? Because I've gotten that debate that it was actually in the ground and was millions of years old and then came up and formed a rock. How do you even approach that question?
Okay, yeah, you need to give them a little lesson on how radiometric dating works. I can tell you that nobody knowledgeable of the field would make that argument, because you can dip your stick in the magma and the rock hardens, that's what's measured. People have said, well, maybe, because the elements are older than that. That's what it's detecting. No, because when it's magma, you see the elements can move. It's fluid. They can move in and out. It's only when it becomes rock, it's only when it hardens that the daughter product is then trapped in that system. Okay, and so I think with I think they used the potassium argon method with the rocks from Mount St. Helens. Argon's a gas, so if it's a liquid, it's just going to bubble right out of there. It's only once it hardens that gas is somewhat trapped in the rock. Now, gas can leak through rocks over time too, but it's somewhat trapped. It's only when it hardens that's the case. And they sent in more than one. They sent in several rocks that were pulled right out of the magma. We saw them form, so they're brand new, but you get estimated ages of millions of years.
But is it possible, though, that it was rock under the earth and then became heated and turned into magma?
Well, it could have been, but once it becomes magma, that resets the age because the argon can leak right through the magma.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then the second question I had, you were talking about the half-life of C14 being 50, what was it,
5,730 years.
5,700 years. How do we know that if we weren't around for 5,700 years to measure that?
Good question. What we can do is we can measure the rate at which a little bit of it decays over a year.
Oh, and then you calculate what percentage decayed and then, okay.
Yep.
All right. That answered my question.
Okay,
Thank you.
good.